Wonderful, wonderful. Welcome, everybody. We're going to give just another moment for a few more folks to join us, and we're going to get this party started. Mike and Kuldeep, how are you both doing today?
I am doing wonderful, Kalia. Thank you. And yourself?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Do you know I'm outside of Denver, and tomorrow morning we are predicted to have our first snow.
Oh my goodness.
We're
Yeah.
predicted to have our first rain in like 4 months.
You need it
Yeah.
then.
How are you doing, Kuldeep?
Well, I have a sprinkler system problem because it's not been shut yet. So
Yeah.
I gotta get my act together. But other than
This
that, I think I'm good.
This is it. This is when everybody in Denver's like, I need somebody to come and blow out my sprinklers now. We got our guy coming tomorrow, Kuldeep. Got to be on top of it.
Today in the afternoon.
Yeah, I know, but I feel like we're okay for one freeze. Here's to hoping. All right, but we're not here to talk about sprinklers today, are we? That's not what we're doing. We're here to talk about the 8 core tenets. We are excited to bring you this session today, so allow me to officially welcome everyone. My name is Kalia Garrido. I head up marketing and events here at Hike 2. Hike 2 also and Great Data Minds, of course, is a Hike 2 company, and that's the entity that we are here to chat with everybody today from under. So a little bit about Great Data Minds. If you haven't heard of us yet, welcome in. We are a collection of passionate data activists, and we're on a mission to modernize the world of data. We do this in 2 different ways. The first is that we have our services arm. This is where we do strategic planning, education, the deployment of critical data projects, and that happens over at hike2.com. Now, in addition to those data services, Hike2 is also a fully functional, best-in-class innovation consultancy, and we specialize in digital transformation strategy, design, and implementations. But when it comes specifically to our data and analytics community, content, and our conversation, that's where you can find us at greatdataminds.com. This is where we host our events, we run our videos and podcasts with transformational thought leaders and innovative technologies, just like what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit of housekeeping. This is a webinar, of course, so your cameras and microphones are off, but we would love you to engage. You can do that via the chat. You can ask a question in the Q&A, and you can also chime in at the very end of the session. We will reserve a little bit of time if people want to ask questions at that point. So allow me to do some introductions for my esteemed colleagues. We'll start with Mr. Mike Lampa. He's our Chief Analytics Officer here at Hike 2 and Great Data Minds. He is an accomplished transformation agent with a specialty in modernizing enterprise-level data and analytics programs. He's got 20 plus years of experience as a data and analytics practitioner, both as a consultant and as an employee in Global 100 enterprises. And he's worked in just a whole boatload of industries. It would take us forever to get through it all. So Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kalia.
All right. And then we also have Kuldeep. And where did my Kuldeep information go?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
I have it. No, you know what? I was going to make it up, Kuldeep, but I do have it.
Yeah, I would have made it up for you.
I'll be like, Kuldeep is an underwater basket weaving instructor, and he is very accomplished. Okay, no, seriously. Kuldeep Singh is an accomplished data and technology executive with over 20 years of experience in data strategy, platform architecture, data engineering, and data governance. As the new Chief Data Officer at Hike2 and Great Data Minds, he is recognized for his strategic insight and technical expertise, and he's consistently driving transformation in organizations through robust data governance frameworks, innovative data strategies, and advanced engineering solutions. And with that, Kuldeep, I will pass the floor to you. Please do take it away.
Okay, thank you, Kalia. And no, I'm not gonna dive in with the sharks,
Yeah.
Kuldeep, I got one question for you. If you and I both have 20 years experience, I'm looking at our 2 images on the screen, you must have started when you were like 12.
Try 8. Young at heart, as they say, right?
That's right.
All right, so let's get started. I mean, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. As a practitioner for such a long time in the industry, what I used to do is, hey, where's the soul of, how do we bring the personality to what we do? And, I've been a data professional managing data teams since 2005, and I've been a data guy since the late 90s. One thing that I very early on I started doing with my groups was, because we were always the centralized function, and looked like we were really working hard, but you take a 2 or 3 levels above in the organization, people necessarily did not know, all of the good things that we were doing. So it was a mission, that I undertook, which eventually became something that I do in every organization that I've led, in much senior roles, is to make sure that the soul and the personality of the data organization shows. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. A few more things before I kind of, Mike and I kind of go back and forth. I wanted to provide some context and really some differentiation of what we're going to talk about today, right? What are we here to talk about? Maybe starting off with what we are not talking about, right? I think that would be an easier thing to kind of, go about. What we are not talking about are data capabilities, data and analytic capabilities, right? I mean, if you run a data organization or you belong to a data organization or you work alongside them, you would know that data organizations are always talking about their capabilities, data governance, data engineering, those are some of the classical data capabilities that data organizations have. But really, what we are here to talk about is the core principles, right, that serve as really the bedrock of an effective data management. So while capabilities like the ones that I described, right, are super essential. In fact, that is what people see, right? I mean, that is what we hire into. That's what, the budgets are for, right? However, the underlying principles such as human-centered design, right, ethical governance, thinking about scalability. I mean, these are some principles or tenets, that you bring to what you do every day, right? This is not something that is written in a book. I mean, there are books written on human-centered design, right? I mean, you can buy plenty of them on Amazon, but it's a way you think, right? It's what you bring every day to what you do, right? So that's one of the key distinctions, that this audience should understand is what's the capability and what's the personality, right? So for instance, you might be building a data visualization, a dashboard, right? In service of some requirement of your business. However, the personality that you bring to it is, have you kind of, really considered, and had empathy for the humans who are going to use it, right? So that's what you bring to everything that you do. As a data engineer, you might be building pipes to move data from here to there, but really your personality is that, hey, I'm going to move data from here to there, but am I doing it, in a secure manner, right? Am I doing it making sure that, whoever uses this data can make ethical decisions? That's how you think. That's how you kind of, evolve. Both as a person, who's involved with data, but also, just the culture of the whole organization, especially if you're a leader, right? So that's really critical. The other things to think about is that the ones that we're going to share, right? These core principles aren't exhaustive. So Mike and I were going back and forth, and we were thinking that, the world of data and analytics and artificial intelligence is evolving, changing, very, very rapidly, right? And we're going to touch upon a few other things, but we're not going to go too deep into, for instance, data literacy, right? We're not going to go into the principle of fairness. We're not going to go into the ethical considerations too deeply. We are going to talk about them. But there are all these evolving concepts and principles that are coming at us. The last thing, right, and I will then stop, is okay, so now you have your capabilities and you have your principles that you bring to work every day. How do you kind of, really make a difference in a large organization or an enterprise? And that we're going to bring up the concept of center of enablement. The center of enablement really acts as a centralized framework, right? Supporting teams by providing resources, best practices, shared vision, education, executive support, right? And really, how do you kind of, bring the culture that you're building within your data organizations to the whole company, right? And so, you get that recognition that I was striving for early on in my career. So with that, we're going to unpack some of these core principles. Mike and I are going to very excited to talk about it. And I don't know, Kalia, if you were going to bring up the slide or the document so people can look at it, while Mike and I kind of, get started here. All right, so, as I mentioned, there are a whole bunch of them. There are 8 of them, right? And we may not have enough time today to cover all of them, so we're going to handpick a few. And of course, we're going to continue to talk about some of the ones that we are not going to talk about specifically in this conversation. We're going to bring that into our dialogue, and Mike and I will continue to kind of provide more context, right? So with that, I'm going to jump into a favorite topic of mine, which is next gen technology, right? And I'm calling it, Mike, I'm calling this a next gen technology because I could have called it modern technology, right? I could have called it futuristic technology. I kind of purposefully picked next gen is because, I'm always, if I'm dealing with technology or a concept or an approach, I'm always looking for, hey, what would this be 5 years from now, right? And then start working my way backwards in terms of kind of, trying to understand, hey, what is the impact today? What's the impact, in a year? What's the impact in 5 years? And today, you have to also think about what's the impact in 10 years, especially if you are in artificial intelligence, Gen AI, quantum computing, right? You have to kind of start building a broader perspective on that. So Mike, I know you've traveled a lot, you have tons of experience, both in the corporate side, consulting. You've also been a teacher of data, right? You go out, do workshop with executives and people at all levels, Talk to us a little bit about, what have you seen? How do we kind of think about forward-thinking data architecture, right? What are some of the principles that the audience can take away? So get us started.
All right. So thank you, Kuldeep. One of my favorite topics of our core principles. So interesting observation I'm going to make is next gen is happening like every freaking day. I swear, every time I turn around, there's new significant releases being deployed. And I'm going to pick on the cloud data warehouse area, for example. You've got the usual suspects. You got the Snowflake and Databricks. Microsoft is moving to Fabric, which is a Databricks implementation under, at the open source level. And then you got Google with BigQuery. Every one of these cloud data warehouses are incredibly powerful. And it seems like every day a new significant capability and feature has been released for consumption. And I'm going to pick on a couple. First, though, before I get into the specifics of these technologies themselves, I'm going to just offer to the audience, don't forget the art of data modeling. Really understand your end user case, understand the data that's available to enable that case, and model the data to enable the end user consumption. Usability is key, back to your human-centric design concept, Kuldeep. We are forgetting about the importance of data modeling because it's so easy to deploy databases with these technologies, right? But if you don't have an eye towards architecting the structure of your data to not only enable current use cases, but expand for future use cases, you're going to start to feel this insidious buildup of technical debt, right? So putting that aside, let's talk about the capabilities of these cloud data warehouses. Of course, their ability to scale is amazing, right? You push a button and you automatically scale. You push another button, you say, for now on, just automatically scale and then automatically bring it down. Another capability that has just blown our data engineers away, just in recent months, we were in the middle of building out a use case on Snowflake, and my data engineer called me and said, Mike, Snowflake just released this thing called partition data tables. I said, well, whoa, cool. What's that? He goes, it just automated the whole change data, capture data pipeline for me. I don't have to write a lick of code. Like, I was like, holy camole, right? Things like that are amazing. And why is that? Because, building data pipelines that accurately detect changes in the source and only bring those changes across accurately, it takes a lot of effort. And
Mhm.
oftentimes it takes too much effort. So it ends up being, we take shortcuts. What happens? Insidious technical debt starts to build up. So just capabilities like that are, I find, incredible for speed of market and the ability to deliver value to the customers as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of concern. We're going to talk about some of those concerns later, around cost and all that.
Yeah.
These platforms, they're very aware of people's concerns around that, and you have so many levers to work with, right? Things that you, as a data architect from years gone by, we had to design around all these capabilities, and now they're just there out of the box for us. Love it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think, well said. I mean, I feel like, when I look at the tech companies who are actually building these products, right? I mean, yes, they're tech companies, but they're product companies. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about
Mhm.
products. And, one of the principles, Mike, that I always, when I was leading data engineering teams, even till, just a year back, I would kind of ask my data engineering leader to say, okay, what do you believe in, right? I mean, writing pipes from here to there, speeding pipes, that is something that is necessary. That's what
Mhm.
business calls for. So I was looking for things like, we're going to automate everything, right? We're going to, from the time, and we're going to leverage the tools and the technologies that, these tech companies are offering us. Data, I think you
Mhm.
mentioned Databricks, Snowflake. They're making it easy for us to kind of imbibe that culture, the values,
Yep.
and the principles that we believe in as good engineers, right? We're going to be
Mhm.
productized, we're going to be automated, right? We're going to constantly be watching for, what's going wrong, so we can adopt,
Mhm.
automate,
Mhm.
sometimes autonomously, but also human in the loop, right?
Yep.
So things that we had to kind of do almost like in an island, now it's
Right.
all kind of embedded within your platform, and so you're bringing the personality of the platform is changing, and I can't even imagine where it would be as we start infusing a lot more artificial
Yeah.
intelligence and intelligence into our platforms. Don't you
Yeah.
think?
And one other comment I would like to make, when you look across, the big four,
Yeah.
that you have options, to choose from in the cloud data warehouse, SaaS products, or even platforms that have as a service. Many of them are just that now.
Mhm.
Um, you should go through an assessment process, some kind of subjective assessment. Maybe you need to quantify the subjective feelings around those capabilities. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, pick a horse and ride it, because they're all on par, and they do this every month, right? Um, so just get down the road. I mean, there's some considerations, like, if you're mostly a Microsoft shop, you're
Mhm.
probably going to behoove yourself to lean in towards the Databricks/Fabric space, leveraging the whole Delta table capability. But if you're more of an AWS shop, you might want to consider leaning in towards Snowflake. But when I say pick a horse and ride it, it's easy enough to port between these data platforms as well. So keep that in mind.
Yep. Yep. No, I think that's again well said. So I think if as we exit this specific principle, Mike, I mean, one
Mhm.
of the things that I would request, or
Mhm.
request my colleagues on who are joining us here to kind of think about, hey, what are some of the core principles you believe in as you design your. So one of the simplest one is automation, right? I mean, and Mike kind of spoke about that. There are many others, modular design, right? So that as changes happen in your business, you can easily change the look and feel of your platform. So make sure that, before you start building, your engineers jump on it and start doing ETL and things like that. Think
Yep.
about
Yep.
what are the core architectural kind of principles that you believe in, your organization believes in,
Yep.
and build to that, but also keep a door open, because guess what? Things are changing on a daily basis, weekly
Well,
basis, definitely on an annual basis.
yeah, and that's a good point, Kuldeep, because in this whole next gen principle, that is part of the principle, is things are constantly changing.
Mhm.
Embrace that and take advantage of it. So, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's go to our second principle, Kuldeep. You mentioned a few times around, you know, the importance of a human-centered design. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you know, at the end of the day, our data strategies, they are successful if they're enabling the human to do things more accurately, more effectively, to generate more value. So tell me a little bit, you know, like when we're starting to talk about human-centered design, data people don't necessarily think that way. They think
Mhm.
data is the gold. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, data's crude, right? We got to enable actionable insights with the human. So give me some of your thoughts around, you know, when we say human-centered design, help the audience understand the applicability in our space here.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I came across human-centered design and data. I used to work for this investment bank, and our financial advisors, right? They were they had different personas, right? I mean, you know, some of them were dealing with, you know, $50 billion families, right? You know, others were dealing with mass affluence and, you know, people with over $1 million in their assets, and or the high net worth. I mean, the persona was fairly wide. So we were building this framework, you know, or rather a visual, a front end, a UX, right, for the financial advisor population. And I saw how the human-centered design and the system, you know, thinking was brought in to kind of really start bringing the emotions of the financial advisors out, right? And we did multiple, and I was just a data guy sitting in there at, you know, we got to visit several branches, and these human-centered people will come and they'll talk about, you know, user needs, right? Enhancing usability. How do you gauge engagement? And, you know, what would ultimately be of value? And in my mind, value was they have their data, they have their analytics, right? But they were talking about differently, right? They were talking about really value from how a financial advisor actually interacted with all of these technologies. So that's where I kind of got hooked on, right? Since then, I've you know, spent some time at the Stanford, you know, Institute of Design, understood, really kind of went deep into human-centered design. And so essentially, you know, I mean, it's all about how humans think. And if we even bring this really close to home, I'm not going to talk about financial advisors, but the data. If data was our business, you know, who are the people who are, you know, within our business, right? I mean, you can think about your data engineers, you can think about data stewards, your data governance people. In the past, even building an ETL pipeline was difficult. It was because you would kind of write a workflow, and then you'll kind of somehow get another tool to connect it with the data quality. And then there will be another tool that will, you know, you forgot because you're in such time pressure, you know, you're thinking about data profiling. So essentially, the tools of the past, right, didn't kind of quite consider the human in the middle, the data engineer. And how do you make sure that the data engineer has time to focus on the business value, business applications, business knowledge, business literacy, versus being mired in trying to connect all of these disjointed applications and tools, right? So if you think about the value stream of a data engineer, of where they pick the data and they classify, they tag, right? They kind of document, and then they store, and they do a whole bunch of other things all the way to when the data actually becomes kind of usable, right? So that's the value stream of your data engineer. And similarly, data steward in your governance program. How do you make their lives easy by providing them with, you know, a connected experience, right? Now that you can take this example and you can fit it into a financial advisor or any of the other industries that you are kind of, you know, catering to. So essentially, you know, I mean, that's the concept of of human-centered design, and you can do it in multiple ways. I mean, most people kind of, you know, are engaging with their stakeholders early and in a continuous, you know, manner. There is other things like iterative prototyping and testing, right? So there are multiple ways of engaging with your stakeholders, and the stakeholders such as a data engineer or a financial advisor, right? There's constraint mapping, right, where you're looking at, hey, if I was building this product and all of these constraints are available, I mean, or I'm dealing with all of these constraints, as I'm building the product that I'm building or the pipelines that I'm building. However, given my constraints, I don't want to overpromise, right? So that's another aspect of human-centered design, is to make sure that whatever you deliver is usable. And so there are multiple techniques. If you have the time, I know we have another session coming up in a month where we're going to only dig deep 60 minutes into human-centered, right? So I can go much more deeper into that.
Yeah, and I want to make sure the audience doesn't miss business value. That is, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're about. How do we generate improvement in business outcomes? How do we create value, right?
Yeah, and one persona at a time, Mike, right?
Yeah.
There's so many personas. I mean, there are things, like I think the most common ones are that audience would recognize, right? People who build products is like design thinking workshops. I mean, we've all been part of that, right? Initially you spend time on empathy, then you kind of, work around defining, right? I mean, other things that we know about are persona-based discovery sessions where you bring all these personas together and let them kind of interact with each other. So we're building a product for multiple personas.
Yep.
Recently, there are journey mappings, right, in digital transformation. So there are multiple ways, but I think for data professionals, if you are building a product for your audience, whoever your audience is, or you want to make lives of your teams easy, start kind of considering the human-centered and system-centered thinking.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And my final thought around there is when you start to have that mindset towards value, you start to change the discussion and move away from data and analytics as a cost center. It's not an expense, it's an investment that's generating value. Yeah. So now I'm having a whole different kind of dialogue with my executives, right?
Yeah. But Mike, one thing that I felt that, what is going to transform even human-centered design, right? Or the next gen technology that you spoke about is, how can data organizations use artificial intelligence for themselves, right? Or how can we continue to embed artificial intelligence, techniques to improve experience, to kind of, improve intelligence, right? Not only in the business of data that, we manage, but also just embedding artificial intelligence. I mean, have you had much experience? Because that's, I think, our third principle, and we want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, the whole Gen AI, of course, took all of it, took the industry by storm, early in 2023, right? I remember my dear business partner, Julie Burrows, calling me up. I think it was like, January 12th, and said, what are our Gen AI offers? And I said, I don't even know what the heck this thing is, right? But in very short order, right, we're seeing a lot of documented use cases, a lot of things around enabling the agents, better interaction with the chat, involvement. I ain't talking smack on you, Julie Burrows. It was true. You made me rise to the occasion that next gen technology was here, and I needed to react to it. So there's a lot of the usual suspects. I can automate the ability in my marketing areas, or better customer service and all that. But let's talk about some of the other things we can be doing within the data and analytics professional, delivery professionals, right? We can unlock, first of all, the ability to leverage generative AI technologies is unlocking previously unusable data that has a wealth of additional context, which is incredibly valuable for generating more insightful analytics, right? We're taking discrete data points out of unstructured data, out of documents that truly can be woven in to our day-to-day workflows, that produces much better context and understanding of the situation that we're interacting with. But let's also talk about the fact that we can be using generative AI capabilities to do things like automate the mundane, automate the arduous, right? Migrating between database platforms. You think that's going to be happening, given as people move away from MySQL and Postgres and SQL Server into these cloud data warehouses? We need to migrate, or even, I said earlier, pick that horse and ride it, because you can move between these. You can automate that movement, right? You can leverage these Gen AI agents that you build for you as a developer to automate that migration, validate the data in a much more effective manner, so that, why am I doing all this? It's all about agility. It's always about seeking the highest level of value in the quickest amount of time. Or even, BI platform market right now, very competitive market. Companies are looking at, they've been sitting on BI platforms that are going 20 years old, and they're looking at this next generation set of platforms. How about if we automate the migration of all those BI objects, leveraging Gen AI? These things are capable, very doable right now. Not to mention, you can put deeper context into interrogation of data and generating data quality rules to produce data hygiene reports. So just an incredible, every day. Let me put it this way: if you do any kind of development project twice, where you had to manually code that solution, that's a trigger. That should be a trigger as a guiding principle that you ought to automate this capability, so that you can move on to the next value-added capability around building something new, right? And once you build something new once, and you're about to build it twice, I wonder if Gen AI could help me out. That should be our mantra, right? With this technology, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then, earlier I was talking about, I think you mentioned it, like data profiling, data quality, right? Even in high volume, transactions, and things like high frequency trading, and if you're bringing in data in real time, right? I think predicting the quality of data as data is coming in, right? And then putting a stop to, when you are seeing anomalies, which are very dangerous, eventually could lead to security issues or unethical decisions, or whatever decisions you're making, right? I think embedding AI into engineering, embedding AI into even analytics. Mike, I know you work very, very closely with embedded analytics, more English language querying. I think that could be a use case even for engineering organizations or data organizations, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be just for business.
Yeah, that's a good point. Every week I see new announcements where software platforms as a service, SaaS products, whether they're data catalog SaaS products, the data cloud data warehouses, data pipeline, ETL, ELT platforms, data catalogs, I would say catalogs, BI platforms. They're all embedding Gen AI capabilities inside their product to lift up the experience, right? So it's happening all over, and I am so grateful that this technology came about and finally unlocked the potential that we've wanted to have for the last 10 to 15 years. And you know what? All of this technology stuff that we just talked about, I get so jazzed up on it, Kuldeep, right? And it's easy to get fired up and take advantage of this stuff, and you move the needle and be more agile and be more creative. But we have to take a moment and say, but let's ground ourselves, right? There's the concept around, we still have to make sure we've got a responsible use of these technologies, right? First of all, just, from a company policy standpoint, it's the right thing to do, but the regulatory environment is moving as quickly as the evolution of these enabling technologies. Can you talk to me a little bit around what do we need to do to make sure we've got the right trust, responsibility, and ethics and governance woven into these capabilities?
Yeah, no, super critical. And thank you for bringing this up, because it's also part of our core principles.
Thank you very much.
To touch upon. Last I checked, which was a couple of weeks back, and I haven't checked, this week, 155 new laws and regulations across the globe being introduced right now, right? And even in the United States, which, if you're a national company or, even a regional company, right? Every state, Colorado just came up with their own, right? AI governance law. New York came out last year. I know that Oregon, several states, I don't mean keep naming, we're going to see regulations and all of them come towards us more frequently and in a much more faster and a much more intrusive manner, right? I mean, people want to know that the regulators rather want to know that you can actually explain the decisions you're making using artificial intelligence or Gen AI.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in highly regulated industries, of course, there's so much excitement about Gen AI. However, there's also a little bit of a pause, right? A pause because, people have to now stop, practitioners and experts have to now stop and say, hey, how does Gen AI or AI, right, fit into the frameworks that we have put in, for the past 50, 60 years, right? Some companies have their enterprise risk frameworks and, regulatory frameworks. So it's very, 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 very interesting, and it's going to become, a topic of discussion if it not already is in the organizations that you work in. However, just very quickly, what can we do? I always talk to people and I say, that think about your foundation, right? The foundations are, stop thinking about LLMs for the time being, right? Just go directly to your data. What are you doing? I mean, data that you have is your differentiator, right? That is going to be your ultimate competitive, advantage here in the next 5 to 10 years. Do something about it. Collect it, store it, clean it, make sure that it's governed, make sure there are metrics, managing. So make sure that your data is very well handled, right? And do whatever it takes to kind of, use it for feeding into clean data into your artificial intelligence algorithms, so that the decisions and the insights that come out are unique to you. Quickly, governance. I mean, I touched upon governance. It's huge. Governance is all about auditing, right? And making sure that you're monitoring not only your data, but the data that you're feeding to your artificial intelligence. However, artificial intelligence needs to be monitored too. If you don't monitor, the models, the performance of the models, and it introduces skewed data, or like how we used to say back in the days, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So take care of your data, make sure that you have a very, very solid governance practice. And the third thing I would say is the use cases, right? The use cases really are the ones that people touch, your customers touch, your internal stakeholders touch. Make sure that whatever use case you think your data analytics, AI, Gen AI, right, is going to solve and and you're going to release into your markets, it's well thought out and it reflects your values, your brand, because that is at disadvantage, because of what Gen AI could do if you're interacting with Gen AI with wrong data, right?
Yeah.
And then the fourth foundation is really your foundation models, the LLMs that you interact with. Make sure you're feeding it the right prompts, making sure that so building these foundation and making sure humans are in the loop, right? So you have 4 or 5 of these really solid foundation. And then from there, you need to have a framework, right? So once you have this foundation, now you have figured out what use cases you're going to use, pick a framework. There are many frameworks out there for ethical use of artificial intelligence. They're emerging because artificial intelligence and Gen AI is changing, right? And it's only going to continue to change with the quantum coming into the picture here very soon. And but now you can actually, interestingly, and I actually chuckled, you can actually buy a product called bias as a service. So you can take this piece of snippet of code and you can plug it into your artificial intelligence algorithms, and of course, tune it to make sure that it's looking for bias in your data. So things are getting easier, things are getting automated, but yes, super critical. And if anybody is interested in frameworks, I'm happy to spend an hour to whatever. That's my research interest. And but have a good foundation, but also have great frameworks that you can monitor, manage. Frameworks are all about fairness, transparency, right? Integrity of your environment. It's about privacy, security. So there's all of these different principles within the framework that you need to monitor, right? Yeah. And so that's the thing that I was thinking. But one thing I feel, Mike, last thing I'll say about this, right, is design thinking, product thinking, right? When you think about a product, you're not missing out on a whole bunch of requirements, right? That's why the importance of data products, because it's kind of taking the emotion, the technical specs, all of that into consideration. I know you speak very, very eloquently and deeply about data products, Mike. How can all of what we learned thus far? How can you kind of infuse that into the data products that our audience might be building right now?
Right. Thank you for that, Kuldeep. You know, it's as a principal, it truly is a mindset, right? And I'm also going to offer up that we, as an industry, we may be doing ourselves a little bit of disservice when we just talk about data products and we just talk about data governance, because as I said earlier, data is, it's the crude, right? But it's the means. It's the use of that data, the analytics, the insights that we're generating, things that are prompting people to take action based on this empirical evidence, which is data, right? And trends and patterns and all those things. So we have to step back and say, from a governance standpoint, first of all, before we totally leave that, it's not just data governance, it's analytic governance as well, because the most, a lot of the regulations coming on is around ethical use of analytics on top of data, right? Was traditionally just, fundamental traditional artificial intelligence / machine learning. And now it's exasperated because now it's generative AI on top of it. And the same mantra needs to carry over into product management mindset, right? I'm building data products that it's not just a data set, right? It's got access methods as part of the characteristics of that data product. How are you going to make the data available such that it's secure, such that it's governed, right? So what are the access controls? What are the security controls? What are the methods to make access to this data very easy, yet properly controlled, right? And it's also around the analytics. We need to have a product management mindset around the analytic solutions that we build on top of the data. And when I say this product management mindset, the key there is these products, if we have a product management mindset, products have a life cycle. We incubate them, we come up with them, we use them, right? We need to monitor the utilization of these products, so there's, as part of building a product, you also have to build in a framework to monitor the telemetry, the utilization of these products, and the outcomes that the product has enabled, right? Because we want to look for, is this data product and or this analytic product, is it moving towards end of life? Because if it's moving towards end of life, we need to be proactive so we don't let that data asset become a data liability. We don't let this analytic asset become a liability. If I've got a bunch of obsolete analytic products laying around, even simple things like dashboard sprawl, I've got hundreds, we're working with several companies right now where you have to migrate, 1,000 dashboards. I was like, there is no way those 1,000 dashboards individually are producing value. I've got to believe there's a bunch of obsolete dashboards there. And how did that come along? Well, I've enabled self-service, but I didn't monitor the utilization. I didn't, create the telemetry and monitor it. So that's a very key element around data product mindset. It's not only the content itself, but it's going to be the utilization and the tracking of that utilization across the life cycle. And as I'm moving towards end of life of a certain product, do we already have the next what's the next version? Are we thinking product management? Are we thinking new releases of that same product? That's very, very, very critical. And it's a little bit foreign for us, data and analytic professionals, but we can get there. We build software, just like the software development group. So let's not let our software become obsolete. Let's track the life cycle of it. What else can I say about that? Because I could go on this one for a while. We've been banging the product management life cycle for quite a while. Kuldeep, we've got another 4 core tenets that we could talk through, but listen, what do you say we take a moment and just open it up to the audience and see if they have any questions or observations on what we've already talked about, or haven't seen a glimpse of all the 8 cores, if they have questions around things we haven't covered yet.
No, absolutely. Let's do that. That's a great idea.
Yep. So if anybody has any questions, they can certainly respond to my ping in the webinar chat. You could put something into the Q&A, or you could raise your hand and we can certainly get you answered that way. In the meanwhile, the marketer and me can't help but share a couple of links while people are seeing if they have any questions. If you are looking for more information about our data and analytics practice, you can reach us at hike2.com. And I've got the link for you there. If you're looking to see a video recording of this event, you can find us on YouTube. And there's the link there. And in the meanwhile, Julie Burrows does have a question. She's asking, how about the humans? What about the education for the people?
People, education for the people. That's a great question, Julie. And there's several forms of education that we have been trying to get organizations to realize is such an incredible investment. I think you did a poll at one point where the average spend on education as a percentage of total spend was like 1%. I was like, what is that telling your organization? Right, the value you need to do giving back to your humans, and there's education around how do we help people walk the journey of transformation such that we can minimize those valleys of despair and keep moving towards the art of the possible. We have education around data architecture and data modeling, just teaching these old art forms that are still as guiding principles very incredibly valuable. Of course, we got education around enabling technologies that we're technology partners with. So education needs to be a very key component of it should be a much greater percentage than 1% of total operating expense that's put out there. Could even be considered an investment. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I'll add to that, I know we're close, slowly getting to our time here, is one thing, from experience, Mike, that I've noticed, right, is that data organizations, at least in the last 5 to 10 years, right, have made one kind of, keeping upskilling themselves or reskilling themselves, or even kind of engaging with the business analysis groups, in the organization, and making sure that there's a two-way traffic, right? When the business analysts who are actually, or the stewards or or business subject matter experts, they're providing perspective on, hey, how is the business kind of going to utilize the analytics? What's their business function, right? And the other side, data people are, connecting with them in terms of, hey, these are the possibilities, like you said, art of the possible. However, one thing that I, as a leader of large data organizations, have realized is that data teams are busy, right? I mean, I feel like everywhere I go now and see my clients, they're all like overwhelmed. They're working hard. There's a lot going on in their companies as transformation. We need to kind of really wrap our arms around these data organizations and start talking about how are we going to also enable them so that they are successful, right?
Exactly.
Of course, there's all this education that is available, but that kind of brings me to that point about what we were talking about, the center of enablement, where a group of people, that's their job, right? To kind of think about that the data group is connected to the product team. Data group is connected to the change management team, right? Data group is connected to education. Data group is connected to all of these other, like business analyst groups, right, that are already organized. And so that way the data engineers can be the best data engineers, but still be plugged into where they can kind of, provide their perspective, or there's this capability or enablement team or a program manager or an evangelist or a coach, right? A lot of what we are now starting to see with our clients is that there is this coach that is kind of providing that coverage, making sure that data organizations are thinking about their brand themselves, right?
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that I would, add, Julie, to make sure that humans are in the middle of everything. Humans are successful on either side of the aisle, right? On the business side as well as on the data side. And how do we kind of, leverage an enablement and a change management philosophy to make sure that we are, driving these organizations to success.
Yeah, what you just shared really resonates with me, Kuldeep, and that kind of goes to the continuous learning as part of a lean mindset is it, okay, let's say I don't get actual money to buy training, right? But I could develop a series of forums where the teams cross-pollinate and cross-educate themselves, right? Hey, we did this some cool stuff. We want to share it with the other delivery teams, you know, and collaborate, you know, so that everybody gets into this mindset is, hey, let's learn to improve. How cool would that be, right? You know, and people get jazzed up about that, you know, where they get to take a break from build, deliver. Now I get to step back, get educated, maybe do some hackathons. That's a learning experience right there. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, that is the principle that you and I were thinking could be part of these principles, right? I mean, it's the literacy and fluency with data across the organization. So
and definitely a pillar of center of enablement.
Yep. Yeah. Any other questions that we had from the audience, Delia?
I don't see any other questions coming in. Not right now.
Gosh, we satisfied
you
all
answered
of their
everything.
inquiries. Yes.
Yeah.
Kuldeep, this has been an absolute enjoyable hour spending time with you, my friend.
No, absolutely, Mike. So thank you so much. I know we didn't cover the three other topics, right? Principles, rather. Speed to market, OpenAI, event-driven architecture, and cloud ready. I mean, I think these are the last thing I would say is, you know, some companies are still on the fence on cloud, right? Of course, you know, that's good, right? It needs to work for your business, but I would say seriously consider it for the benefits. Make sure that API is part of your data strategy, right? Don't kind of, you know, those JDBC still works, making sure that you have access to your data through dashboards, but make sure that APIs and Mike, I think you have in the past spoken about MLOps, data ops, right?
Yeah. Definitely integrating all that. And I mean, because that all just drives back to speed to market and all the things that we have talked about, you know, taking a microservices approach. Is an important element as part of those access methods I talked about. And, you know, and all that, as you said earlier, Kuldeep, you know, the core principles, that all drives to this enablement, the center of enablement, right, for your organization. We want to level up the data and analytics part of an organization. We want to move it away from being a cost center to be a profit center. It's generating value to the organization.
I don't think I can top that, Mike, you know.
Gotcha.
Values. Okay. Back to you, Kelly. I think that was what we had, you know.
Yeah. Great session, guys. Thank you so much for taking us through this, and thank you to all the attendees. My final call to action is that we have our next event coming up. It's on 11/13 at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and that's going to be where Kuldeep, as well as Morgan Llewellyn, who is our AI practice principal, they're going to take us through the data and AI governance framework at that time. So I've dropped a link there. It's a free virtual event, and we hope that you'll join us for that one. But thank you so much to everybody who is listening in, and thank you to Kuldeep and Mike again. This has been a great session.
Thank you, Kelly.
Have a great day.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.